Hi guys, Blacksmith here. I'm going to talk today about line movement, about odds, dispel some myths, maybe open your mind up. Maybe some of you are going to come up with your opinions and speak to me, because there was actually a debate on this subject that rose up yesterday in the comment section in one of my videos. So this is kind of a retort to that, but it's also an exploration about how when you get a bit of knowledge, it can be kind of dangerous and it can influence your belief system, especially for sports betting, which is kind of subjective. There's a lot of ways that you can be profitable in sports betting. And if you're just focusing on one method, you can miss out on a lot of money by using other methods. So this all came about because I was talking about how bookies set lines, how they sometimes try and trap you. And there's one school of thought, which is the bookies make their money from the juice in their lines, which is true. A lot of the times they try and set them accurately, but there are situations when they try and convince you to bet the wrong side. I'll give you an example. Jake Paul versus Mike Tyson. This is my first ever super max bet, where I bet a very large number of units, an uncomfortably large number of units, but I knew it was a lock. Everyone who knows anything about combat sports knew Jake Paul was going to win. The media tried to convince you that Mike Tyson would win, and the bookies actually increased Jake Paul's line, increased Mike Tyson's line to make it more attractive, and were baiting people on, even though 70% of people bet Mike Tyson, so the line should have been moving down. And that was a trap, obviously. Why would the bookies increase the line otherwise? They're hurting themselves with the majority of money bet on Tyson. They made a ton of money, and this happens a lot. But the criticism leveled at me was, don't trust Blacksmith because he bets cup games in football, and cup games have no data, therefore you cannot accurately predict outcomes. Which is kind of strange, because we've had 3 big cup matches over the last week or so, and we've made a ton of money cashing mostly prop bets, but we've bet money lines, we've live bet underdogs, we've bet both teams to score. We've made a load of money from these games. But let me explain why this opinion is so flawed. How do the bookies set their lines then? If there's no data and you cannot predict them, surely that's a good thing, because the bookies have no way to accurately predict. So then we should be able to find value in there, especially live as the game starts, because they wouldn't be able to adjust their lines quick enough if they were unable to accurately set them. So you would get some data quickly and you'd be able to make a quick decision based on what you're seeing. But I think a better counter to this argument would be, 1, teams have played each other before, so you can already see how they match up against each other. Okay, there may be an extra intangible, which is the motivation, but these are things that we can take into account. But let's look at combat sports, shall we? UFC, for example, mixed martial arts. Fighters routinely fight each other without ever having fought before. Most of the times, a matchup, the 2 fighters have never fought each other. And even more drastically, when it comes to the lack of data, and in MMA, this isn't really a viable option to compare fighters with each other because styles are very different, but it's quite common to have 2 fighters who have no common opponent. They've not fought the same person. So how do the bookies make money from mixed martial arts then? Because there's no data, so they can't set the lines. So why do they even offer these markets? It's because they have analysts who, 1, know the sport well, and they can convince people to bet the wrong side. That's what happens quite often. And 2, they can use statistical models. There's actually even a few people I follow who are more focused on just statistics. I like to combine everything together. But they can use statistics to figure out the overs, the unders, and you do it by looking at fighters who fought similar stylistic opponents, who've got a similar fighting style. There's subjectivity involved in it, and that's why I think you can have a bigger edge with mixed martial arts. But the point is, the bookies make money from combat sports with no data to go back on. So we've got more data in cup games than mixed martial arts, because the teams have actually played each other before and similar opponents. So we've got loads of data. And so what, for the last 3 big games then, have we just got really lucky with our player props? and with our bets? Is it just pure luck? Now, this person and a lot of other people actually have this belief, and I have had this discussion, albeit a very brief discussion through chat with a very large sports betting brand, and it's someone who I really respect. I'd like to name them now, but maybe I shouldn't. Who would say, don't bother looking at line movement, it doesn't tell you anything. And I found that ironic because the best handicapper underneath their brand is a huge proponent in understanding betting splits, how much of the public are betting on which side, who the sharp money's on. They even have a series, a weekly series, which is named after exactly this. And they're the best performing tipster in that organization. So I think there is an element of people who've just been shown one way to do things and they're not open-minded to other ways. And two, sometimes it's like, when someone thinks that they know a lot, they are very dogmatic in their approach. And look, I'm always open-minded. I don't know everything. Maybe I could learn something from looking at just the data. But one thing I do know is the more variables you introduce, the bigger picture you've got with everything. And some variables you may exclude, they may not be relevant, but you should still look at them just in case. Give you an example. If a cup game, you might have a team who are just not motivated in the game and they've not put out a good, strong lineup. You might have other teams who are very highly motivated to win the cup. So there's a lot of intangibles at play, but you're always going to have data where the teams are playing each other, where players just, if you look at the player props, shots on target, for example, or total shots, certain players just average a certain number of shots. And you can work out, if you have a weak defensive team, they're more likely to get more shots off. Look at the odds. Okay, you can work out if you think the odds are good value or not, and then you can take the play. That's what we've done, and that's how we've profited so much in the last few days. But the one thing you really want to consider is, one, how accurate is the bookie's line? Because the more accurate it is, the less chance there is that you're going to actually make profit long-term betting it. Because what we're actually looking for is, we're looking for lines that have been set too high. So the odds are too high for the actual probability of the event. And you can just use basic statistics to work this out. And the most important thing is to try and exclude any matches, if you're doing football, or any data points which are anomalies. So maybe a team loses, but they got a red card in the first 10 minutes. It's probably not best to include that game in there because that is such an anomaly. It's only going to happen 10% of the time, 10% of all matches. In the Premier League, even less, because there's less red cards. But in football in general, there's a red card about 20% of the time. So about 10% of the time, a team is going to get a red card, which is much higher than most people realise. This is also why accumulators and parlays are not very profitable in football especially, but in all sports, because of this sort of variance. So you're looking for odds that have been set too high, and this is why player prop markets are so lucrative, because there are so many players, and then you've got tackles, you've got shots on target, you've got yellow cards, red cards. The books really will struggle to get that right. So they just use pure statistics. They don't look at the subjective nature of the statistic. So people like this person who is saying, oh, you can't accurately predict what's going to happen, you're just not considering you're not considering the context of the statistics. You know, it's a bit like with MMA. If I can see a fighter has knocked out every opponent in his last 10 fights or her last 10 fights, by looking at the data, you would say, oh, they're definitely going to get a knockout. But if you actually look at the context, maybe those 10 opponents have all been really low level regional fighters, very low skill, and now they're making a big step up against a much better fighter. This happens in the UFC a lot, by the way. And then you see the fighter who's just got knockout after knockout after knockout, win after win after win. You see them lose. Because just because they knocked everyone out before then doesn't mean they're going to knock the next opponent out. That's like a false positive, because you're acting like every opponent is equal, and that is just not true. That's where the actual sports knowledge comes into play. That's why the footy tipster is so good at betting football, because he's just got a very good knowledge of football. Really, sports betting is more about understanding odds, but he understands odds very well as well. But when you combine that with a really solid understanding of the game and how teams stack up against each other, their stylistic matchup, that's when you've got the gold. But you want to start looking at the odds, because the bookies, like I've said many times, they have the best data set in the world. They have data that you and me can never dream of having. They've got the best data, the best modeling, they've got the best analysts money can buy, they've got armies of analysts, they've got specific sports analysts who are experts. They're quite good at setting lines, but there's so many of them that if you spend enough time, you will find lines that have just not been set accurately. So it's a numbers game. We spend hours, sometimes up to 16 hours a day when we've got a really busy day, handicapping, and we might look at, I don't know, 20 matches or 20 games to get one play, because 19 of them, either the odds aren't good enough or the edge isn't big enough to tip. And even then, your ROI is not going to be as much as most people think. Most people think that tipsters double their money every day. If you could do that, you would be the richest person on planet Earth in less than 6 months. So actually, tipsters are winning, 55, 60% of the time on average if they're betting even money. So we are looking for as good an edge as we can get one. And if we can get a 10% edge, that's good. And we know that it's going to make us 10% profit over a long period of time. That's how sports betting works. The person who's been talking about this is a voice I hear a lot from more old school bettors and for people who've learned from old school handicappers. That does work and that is a good method, but why would you exclude the most accurate data from a bookie who their job is to make sure their lines are accurate, or to mislead you into betting on the wrong line? So look at MMA, look at Jake Paul fight, perfect example there of what I'm talking about. It was no accident that the bookies made millions and millions and millions of dollars on the Jake Paul fight from people betting on Mike Tyson, and that the sharps like us made a ton of profit betting on Jake Paul. They managed to manipulate everyone to bet the wrong side, and the one way they do that is by controlling the narrative in the media, and then the other way is by offering odds that look so attractive people have to take it. But you can tell when this is happening, because if there's the majority of money on someone or on a team, that line should be going down, because that money should be reducing the line. As money comes in on an odd, it gets pushed down. So when that odd gets increased, that means they're trying to tempt more people to bet it. They knew the outcome before the fight, and it was obvious as well. If you know anything about combat sports, you would know Mike Tyson at his age with his health issues was always going to lose. And Jake Paul controls the promotion as well. He is going to win most of the time that he has a fight, because they are engineering it. His team are engineering it. And the moment he's looking at fighting Conor McGregor, perfect, very good business decision, because Conor's a big name. Conor's also smaller than him. Conor's fought at welterweight as his heaviest weight. Jake Paul has fought at light heavyweight, so he's a much larger fighter. Conor actually spent most of his career at featherweight, and a lot of gyms will not let a featherweight spar with a light heavyweight. They probably will, because especially when they're not preparing for a fight, that featherweight's going to be, probably lightweight, so maybe closer to 70 kilos. But if they're preparing for a fight, they are definitely not going to be doing that. They're not going to risk the concussion, or they're going to be going slower. So that's one aspect of it. The other aspect is Conor McGregor's pulled out of his fight, his last fight. There are a lot of rumours about his lifestyle being in excess. It's the perfect opportunity. These fights are engineered to make money and to make the promoter, Jake Paul, look good. Doesn't mean he's going to win every time. He's had that one fight with Tommy Fury. Most people accurately predicted that he would not win that. And that was a case where he went against his coach's advice when he was sort of allegedly was told, you probably don't want this fight. It's probably not a good decision. He believed that he could do it. And then now he's gone back to the easy fight. So guys, there's always a narrative at play. Always ask yourself when you're watching the sports media, what are they trying to get me to do? Because the bookies make so much money. They're in bed and they're in control of the main sport. The main sports, if you look at like NFL, NBA, they work together. It's a symbiotic relationship. And it's no coincidence that when you hear everyone talking about a bet, it ends up losing. It happens all the time, guys. So keep your eyes and ears open. Look at what the bookies are doing when they set their lines, because that information is gold. You're not always going to be able to interpret it. This is something that might just happen 1 in 15, 20 times. But those times when it is obvious, it's gold. So be very careful out there. Be careful who you're listening to. Keep an open mind and keep learning, because when you learn and keep an open mind, that's when you're going to understand when people come at you with different opinions, and you can take things from it. Or in this case, I'm going to be looking more and more for spots where the context behind the statistics doesn't match up with the actual statistics, because that's when you're going to get a lot of people betting on something thinking it's a certain hit that it's definitely going to win, but actually the statistical information just lacks context. So be careful out there, guys. Keep learning, smash the bookies, take their money, and you're only going to do that by educating yourself. Join the group, the link's in the description if you want to learn more about sports betting. Let's have a big weekend again.